hollow bargain. The barge Perfuga drifted through the void, a hulking silhouette of rust and desperation, barely held together by patchwork augments and scavenged mechanicus grafts. It groaned under its own weight like a drowned cathedral, its hull stitched with void leaks and devotional weld scars. At the helm, Sorny Naevna muttered half-forgotten litanies, tracing void runes with ink-stained fingers across her cracked console. The signs were not imperial, not anymore. Fragments of a dead faith reassembled in the shape of something new. Her posture was hunched, her thin frame swallowed by the faded remains of a word-bearer's serf's armor, modified with relic fibers and talismans of her native tribe. Her presence radiated an unshakable certainty, a pilot in her element. She knew exactly where they were going. Caden Ferrisborn watched her from behind, arms crossed over his worn battle plate. He had stopped asking questions. Sorny had simply told him, "Elfscathia, we must go." Cinerion had ordered it, of course, but Caden sensed a deeper current, some underplan only she understood. He followed because he trusted her without knowing why. Still, unease coiled beneath his calm exterior. He had spent his life avoiding contact with the Drukhari, finding them as untrustworthy as they were decadent. Now he was being taken to their playground. Beside him stood Valkaron, silent, watching. The crimson-armored word-bearer had offered no commentary since entering the system. Whether he knew more or merely relished Kedon's discomfort, Xedon couldn't say. Then the ship banked hard, thrusters shrieking as they fired. The viewport shutters rolled aside with a hiss, and Xedon saw their destination, Elfscathia. At first glance, it was chaos incarnate, a jagged mass of interlocked hulls, cathedral towers twisted with alien bonework, and mechadendrite-laced pylons jutting out in all directions like the ribs of a leviathan. But Sorny guided the Perfuga in with the precision of someone who had done it 100 times. The closer they drew, the more the true nature of Elfscathia revealed itself. It was a port, a city, built inside the cavernous interior of a space hulk. Bay doors hundreds of meters wide yawned open like the mouth of a hungry whale, revealing docking yards lit by blood-red lumen strips and flickering witch lanterns. Inside it pulsed with life. The void docks overflowed with ramshackle vessels, some sleek and alien, others crude and brutish, their hulls scarred with centuries of battle. Corsair vessels and spined raiders flitted between docking pylons, bearing sigils in a dozen Xenos scripts. Massive transport haulers offloaded crates of salvage, spice, and biotrophies onto towering lifts. Rogue traders in antique void suits haggled beside slavers, whispering promises of prisoners or rare artifacts. A squat vessel bore the faded heraldry of a long-dead imperial house, now repainted with chaos glyphs. Suspensor rigs hoisted a chained void whale into a meat-processing gantry. Below, 100 indentured workers in vac suits pulled its viscera out with monoblades under the command of horn-helmed overseers. Above, a wide gantry bridge spanned from one hull wall to another. Gilded cages swayed from it, inside which exotic beasts and screaming prisoners were paraded for unknown buyers. The air was thick with exhaust, incense, and the scent of hot metal and blood. Caden took a step down the boarding ramp, boots clanging against stained steel. The scent hit him, chemical, alien, familiar. He recognized it as fear, not his, but others. The air here remembered suffering. At his side, Valkaron moved like a revenant. The word-bearer's armor, though dark with wear, still bore the crimson marks of Lorgar's sons. Whispers followed in their wake, murmurs in low Gothic, clipped Eldar, and darker tongues. Those who dared look at them either shrank away or bowed low. Sorny was already ahead, issuing terse directions to the docking crew. She didn't look back. She belonged here. Among vagabonds and pirates, he began to see why the word-bearer found her so useful. Caden did not. They walked into a marketplace. No, that was the wrong word. It was a market city, a vast sprawl as if a hive world had been hollowed out and turned into a trader's paradise, then left to fester and thrive. Rogue traders bartered openly with Kabbalite merchants. Red-robed magi of unknown allegiance haggled over forgotten technologies. Chaos warbands, their heraldry defaced and rewritten a dozen times, stalked the streets of steel and bone. The smells assaulted Caden's sensors. Cooking meat and sharp spices, incense and perfumes from across the sector, cut with the tang of promethium, burnt wiring, and gun oil. The air was thick with noise, drilling and hammering from the docks, merchants shouting over each other, priests of myriad faiths ringing bells and chanting oaths in a cacophony of competing devotions. They passed a group of chaos-adorned squats locked in a heated argument, in High Gothic, no less, with another band of pirate squats. The exchange teetered on the edge of violence before a small group of barely clothed witches slinked between them. Acting as a kind of local law enforcement, they bore poison blades at their hips and wore pain sticks and whips as ornamentation. Cheeton did not rush to announce himself. He didn't know who he was meant to meet, but he trusted in the Neverborn's planning. They would come to him. It didn't take long. Valkaron gave a small gesture with one gauntleted hand, and Caden followed his gaze to a figure slumped beside a trader's stall. He drank from a rusted tin that smelled vaguely like amasec, but likely contained something much stronger. His armor was unmistakable, once the opulent plate of an emperor's children warrior, now dulled, pitted, and stripped of grandeur. Purple and gold turned to grime and rust. He'd removed his helm. His face was pale, drawn tight over bone, with sickly yellow eyes that still burned faintly with some remnant of pride. When he noticed Caden's approach, he grinned, without warmth. "Well," he rasped, "we must be truly damned if the mighty Iron Hands now consort with vagabonds like me." Caden tilted his head, assessing him. "You've fallen far. A high drop for one of the Emperor's children." The sorcerer gave a bitter laugh. "That's one way to say it. My warband is dead. My previous employer is now dust in the void, and the Drukhari won't even let me gamble anymore. Apparently I have debts." He took another swig, licking his cracked lips. "But I do still have my talents." Valkaron's helm shifted slightly, amused. Caden saw the twitch of fingers in battle sign. Useful. "You want purpose," Caden said simply. "You can find it with us, rather than waste away in this rabble." The sorcerer narrowed his eyes. "Just like that, you're sure of yourself." His gaze drifted to the songmaker, maglocked to Caden's hip. He shifted uneasily. "I see my former employer didn't make it. Met Cenarion, have we? Poor man." Caden smirked. "If you're willing to crawl from the gutter and bleed for something again, then yes. And no, I'm not sworn to the Neverborn. This," he tapped the daemon blade, "required a new owner." The sorcerer hugged his tin like it was precious. "All right, so who do I grovel to this time?" "I served Tzeentch once. He stole my clock." He gestured vaguely. "Then I fought under Slaanesh. Don't remember much of that, but I think it was fun. Then came Khorne." He tapped a metal plate on his skull. "Gave me a headache. Never served Nurgle, but I did get a rash once, so who knows." Caden exchanged a glance with Valkaron, who shrugged. "I serve none," Caden said. "I walk in temporary common cause with Cenarion, but my fealty does not bind those who follow me. We could use a librarian. We have an opening." The sorcerer snorted. "Join the 7th, eh?" He took a drink, then pointed to Caden's gear. "I recognized you the moment you entered. The Vox pack, broken but carried out of oath, the daemon blade. You're thrice cursed in my old legion." His voice dropped. "You killed a praetor of our brethren." Caden raised a brow. "He had clean armor?" "He spent the battle in a bunker while we fought the loyalists hand to hand. He dishonored my praetor, so I killed him." A silence passed. Then the sorcerer drained the tin and tossed it aside. "Fine," he muttered, stretching like a man rising from a long grave. "I suppose I've wasted enough time." He grinned, teeth yellow and sharp. "What pigment do I daub my armor in this time?" He glanced between the two of them. Valkaron's red, Caden's patched black and pink. Caden hadn't considered it. He looked to a nearby stall, racks of pigment jars stacked high. A beastman with bell-hung horns ground something in a mortar. The myriad of colors jumbled in his mind. He felt the pink and black of the old 7th was no longer fitting, but what should he have? He looked at Sorny, who glanced back head cocked. She smiled and tore a strip from her own pauldron's cloth wrap, tossing it to him. He did not look at it, but tied it to a coin purse and tossed it to the beastman. "Match the color. Deliver what the coin can buy to the Perfuga." The beastman examined the cloth, turned it in the light, then emptied the purse. Eyes wide, he bowed deeply and began work immediately. The sorcerer raised a brow. "There's the matter of my debts." Caden followed his gaze. 2 Drukhari warriors watching from a balcony. Their eyes never left him. Caden tossed a second purse to the barkeep. After a brief inspection, the man nodded. The Drukhari turned and left without a word. The debt was cleared. The sorcerer stood, swaying, scooping up his bottle. He offered a salute, then extended his hand. Balgor. Kadon clasped his forearm. Welcome aboard the fine ship Perfuga. Balgor paused. The Perfuga? He frowned. That decrepit ore barge from the Hollow Crown? He glanced sideways. Your navigator's insane, Kadon laughed. Appearances can be deceptive. Balgor looked down at his worn armor, then back to his new captain. He nodded and followed his new warband into the crowd. Their journey through Elfscathia took them deeper into the heart of the port, where the shadows grew longer and the air carried the faint metallic scent of blood and ozone. The trio moved with quiet confidence, always aware of the witches shadowing them at a distance. Watchful, waiting. Kadon was here to see someone. He didn't know who the man or thing was, probably a merchant or something worse. He could have asked for directions, but he knew better. If Cenarion had orchestrated this meeting, then everything was already in motion. Instead, he took in the sights. A rogue trader operating from a stall lined with ancient bolt guns caught his eye. The weapons were old but functional. Kadon purchased them in bulk, arranging their delivery to the Perfuga. A whiny parchment-scrawling navigator, Ingusor if he recalled, had requested a few of them. Sorny picked out various engine parts and worn plating, all boxed and tagged to be shipped as well. Trinkets and artifacts of dubious origin followed. His display of wealth drew the attention of merchants and predators alike. He let them watch, let them wonder. He did need the supplies, but the way he acquired them, loudly, visibly, was just as important. This was a statement. Kadon was weighing a Mechanicus-made hatchlock set against a much older version, clearly torn from the hulk itself, polished, clean, and blessed, by a dark Mechanicus priest, or so the label claimed, when a reflection in the gleaming surface of an air pump caught his eye. A face, familiar. He turned sharply. There stood a man he knew, a man he had fought beside for 5 millennia, a Karabath pilot, the one who had fled Run at the battle where Sidon's entire company was annihilated. The man, who had been bartering for a sheet of radiation shielding with a purse far too light, froze as he saw Kadon. He looked as though he'd seen a ghost. The metal sheet slipped from his fingers. Then he stepped forward. They grabbed each other's arms in a warrior's embrace. "I thought you were dead," the man said. "I saw you run," Kadon replied, flatly. The man looked sheepish. Words failed. His eyes were wet with shame. Kadon patted him on the pauldron. "No matter, brother. If you'd tried to fight those dogs, you'd be as dead as the rest of the company. But what brings you here?" The man, Halatrax, once a captain of the Karabath that had fled that fateful day, looked away and gestured toward the docks. "I'm looking for parts. The Zarlite is in port." He held up an arm, bare of armor and covered in weeping radiation burns. Shielding gave out. You know how Karabaths are. Kadon nodded. He had captained one for 40 years. He smiled, reached into his belt, and tossed another purse to the trader. "We'll take what that can buy. Deliver it to the Zarlite." He turned back to his old comrade. "And you, who do you serve?" Halatrax snorted. "Between lords, sir." He eyed the word-bearer and the Emperor's children's sorcerer beside Kadon, Valkaran, impassive, and Balgor half-sloshed and holding a bottle. "Looks like you're doing well," Halatrax continued. "Got room for an old warrior? I've still got 40 crew." Kadon grinned and glanced toward Valkaran. "So now we have 2 ships." Valkaran gave a shallow nod. "Fortune favors us." "Maybe not," muttered Balgor, casually lighting a ball of witchfire in his palm. A small force of Drukhari had encircled them, sleek armored warriors with weapons ready. But there was no hostility in their posture. They moved with a cold, elegant poise, their formation more ceremony than threat. Their leader, a tall figure with metallic braids and a blade staff sheathed at his back, bowed just slightly. "Cabalite machinist Valeth has been expecting you, Lord Kadon of the 7th, he said with perfect diction. The title lingered strangely in the air. Kadon met the Drukhari's gaze and gave a shallow bow in return. "Then lead on," he said, extending a hand to let the officer go first. In the heart of Elfscathia. They were in the skeletal interior of the space hulk, this section half-hollowed and reforged into something almost livable. It was a mess of dangling cables, half-finished corridors, and hunched workers reshaping the wreck with scavenged parts and cruelty. Cabalite machinist Valeth stood at the center of a sprawling mobile workshop atop a massive tracked platform. He was a vision of alien precision, tall, impossibly slender, clad in a long Baroque coat lined with silver threading. His elongated face wore a permanent sneer of amusement. Many-fingered hands twitched absently as he toyed with one of his grotesque creations. It was a beetle-like automaton with serrated legs and glowing green optics at both ends, more like a twin-headed insect than any imperial drone. With a nudge, Valeth set it crawling along the desk, where it scuttled up to 2 broken pieces of pipe, fused the joint seamlessly with a hiss of light, then curled in on itself and went dormant. Caden watched with interest. There was no control cable, no servo skull, no cogitator interface. It moved like it had a will of its own. "Caden Ferrisborn," Valeth purred. His voice was like oil poured on water. Caden looked up, caught off guard. He had been entranced by the machine's strange elegance. "Ah," Valeth continued, placing the automaton back among its kin. "The currents of fate bring me such interesting guests." Caden studied him, then shifted his gaze to the man standing beside him, a human, well-dressed in finery that practically oozed unearned confidence. "You know who I am," Caden said, idly prodding a strange artifact on the work table. It was undeniably Xeno's. No imperial design ever looked so graceful, so alien. "Seems I'm drawing attention lately." Valeth chuckled, stepping forward to retrieve the artifact. With an elegant motion, he polished it on a cloth and replaced it, revealing its true function, a mere paperweight, holding down a spread of jagged schematics. "Of course," Valeth murmured, amusement thick in his voice. "You would not be here otherwise." He gestured lazily toward the man beside him. "You see, I have a deal with Castell." "Ah," Caden said, eyeing the man up and down. "I thought I smelled freshly minted credits." The man scowled. "I was told you were a great warlord." He looked Caden up and down, old armor, scratched and battered. Caden shrugged. "I'm sure one will turn up if you wait long enough. For now, you need something from me, don't you?" The merchant looked at the trio behind him, Astartes from 3 fallen legions, and finally at Sorny, flanked by 2 bruised guards. She bore a fresh welt on her cheek. The guard to her left had a black eye and clutched a broken wrist. The other's nose was bent and bleeding. They had clearly tried to bring her in forcefully. She'd reminded them she was crew. The man straightened. "I am Merchant Prince Hālgengas of Castell. One day I will rule it. You will call me Sir or Lord when addressing me." Caden glanced at Valkyron, then stepped forward. "I don't see an Astartes," he said coolly, "and I don't call anyone else Sir." Harrigan drew breath to respond, but his mouth snapped shut. Veins bulged at his neck as his body trembled, slowly buckling. He dropped to one knee as if pressed by invisible chains. Valkyron stepped forward, hand raised, voice flat and reverent. "You speak to a son of Ferrus Manus. You are in the presence of the Iron Hand's ghost. Though the chapter remains shackled to the throne, he has served the gods for 5,000 years. Show him respect." Baelgor watched with visible delight. For a word-bearer, Valkyron's power was impressive, raw even. Not gifted like his own, but granted by devotion and forged in wrath. Perhaps, Baelgor thought, he had finally found worthy company. Harrigan crumpled, gasping for breath as Valkyron released him. He staggered back to his feet, pale and shaking. You will not assault me," he choked. Caden rolled his eyes. "At least try to be polite," he said. Cabalite machinist Valeth had watched the scene with quiet amusement. Now he laughed. "Oh, please don't damage him, either of you," he said, his voice sharp with mockery. "He comes bearing an offer your warband will find most interesting. At least hear him out before turning him inside out." Harrigan turned to Valeth, horror on his face, but he forced himself to bow, trembling. "My apologies," he grunted, "to all of you." Valeth beamed, clearly enjoying himself. "Perfect. Look how well we can all get along. Elf Scathia, if it is anything, is a uniting influence, bringing all our differing views together in perfect alignment for trade." Somewhere nearby, someone screamed in fear and agony, as if to emphasize his point. Valeth placed his long hands on the desk. Now I was led to believe that this exchange would be conducted in good faith and be of benefit to both parties. Everyone was watching him now. His eyes gleamed with anticipation. This was clearly a deal he'd worked on for a long time. "Lord Seedon," he said smoothly, "you will hand over samples of your Astartes implants and an extraction of your gene seed." Caden's eyes widened. Baelgor snorted and sprayed wine down his chest plate in laughter. "Would you also like the sword of the Emperor?" Caden replied, deadpan. "Or perhaps the claw of Horus?" Valeth raised one elegant hand. "This is no jest. It is the offer. You are part of a pact." Caden leaned on the table, staring at the Drukhari. For the first time, he noticed the group of Kabbalite Medicae technicians standing nearby, each with surgical tools glittering under the lumen strips. He smiled thinly. "A sample of all my implants and my gene seed?" He tilted his head. "You do realize I'm over 5 millennia old, yes? The warp taints gene seed. That's why the traitor legions could never replace their losses. My own captain tried for centuries. He failed, repeatedly." Valeth's grin widened. His spidery fingers reached for a set of rolled scrolls. He unrolled one and handed it to Caden. It wasn't parchment. It was a hololith sheet, rare in the Imperium, nearly extinct since the heresy. The display flickered to life, revealing a long list of coordinates, dates, and readings. Every place Caden had entered and exited the warp, exposure levels, mutation risks, gene strain breakdowns. It was meticulous, impossible. "How?" Caden began. Valeth plucked the hololith back from his fingers and tapped it lightly against the hilt of Caden's demon blade. "Your never-born weapon," the Drukhari said. "I had it scanned the moment you set foot on Elf Scathia." He turned away, placing the sheet gently among other strange devices. "The Drukhari maintain our gene stock in the same way," he added casually. Caden frowned. "I thought the Drukhari were all clones." "Most are," Valeth replied. "But we still breed, though rarely, a side effect of our immortality." Seedon leaned over the schematics, eyeing the alien blueprints with feigned interest. He couldn't decipher them, but nodded as if impressed. "Knowing how degraded my gene seed is doesn't solve your problem," he said. "You'd need a gene right, and there are none left, not outside of Mars." "No," Harrigan cut in, "not even on Mars. All they do now is replicate. They've forgotten how to repair. That's why gene seed is so valuable," he smirked. "To fix yours, we need a sample of its original form." Caden arched a brow. "A 35th Millennium Iron Hand? That's a tall order. How exactly do you plan to acquire one?" Valeth raised a hand again. "Actually, we don't need a Heresy-era sample. A modern one will suffice. We'll use yours as a reference to reverse any warp-induced degradation. With both samples, tainted and current, we can synthesize a restored pattern." He shrugged. "More or less. Some organs may be unreliable, but the gene seed is what matters most." Seedon narrowed his eyes. "And as far as I know, there are only a handful of iron hands in the Reach. How do you expect to get one?" Harrigan, still rubbing his bruised throat, stepped forward. "We have plans for that." Valeth cut in smoothly, raising a hand. "That is not your concern." Caden turned back to the merchant prince, his expression hardening. The entire scheme reeked of overconfidence and madness, but he wasn't ready to kill them all. Yet, he folded his arms. "All right then, what do I get in return?" He was beginning to see why Cenarion had truly saved him. Her scheme, grand, tangled, and profane, hinged entirely on the possession of a 5,000-year-old relic like him. And as fate would have it, thanks to the bloody work of the novice Astra Wigathine, he was the last surviving traitor Iron Hand in the Reach, possibly the last one anywhere. She hadn't saved him out of loyalty, kinship, or strategy. She'd saved him because she had no choice. He was her only hope, the last surviving relic in a failing escape pod. But he had just acquired an even greater bargaining chip. Harrigan seemed to regain some of his composure. "Castel is known for its cloning techniques," he said. "In fact, most of our population is vat-grown. While we're better known for cloned meat production, we've recently entered into an agreement with Archmagos Damia Voratrix of NihtWyrtha. Their fish bowl," he meant Fiskbola, though few outsiders pronounced it correctly, "will provide agricultural supplies in exchange for," he paused, "a reasonable supply of great forge products. As far as she is concerned, she's supplying armor for our Adeptus Arbites contingent." Caden nodded slowly. It was a familiar arrangement. One forge throttled production, allowing another to fill the gap in exchange for something necessary. Clean, effective, but troubling. "You're planning to clone Astartes implants," Kadon said, "and gene seed. Using your spare cloning vats, you're trying to make Astartes?" Harrigan laughed, genuinely this time. "Oh no, Castell has ambition, but we're not insane. We don't have the experience, the training, or the Mechanicus blessing. No, we want to augment our soldiers, not turn them post-human." Kadon nodded again. That made sense. Harrigan was ambitious, but grounded. In a reach filled with zealots, pirates, and madmen, here was a man who thought like a survivor. Defensive, pragmatic. Kadon could respect that, grudgingly. "Very well," he said. "But what do we get from this bargain?" Harrigan's grin returned, though he still stood slightly stooped from Valcaron's earlier grip. "Castell is prepared to offer you 10 cloning banks and the corresponding gene seed nutrient tanks. We can't flash clone Astartes tissue, but we can grow it, slowly. The implantation, however, that's your concern." Kadon rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It wasn't ideal, but it was something, a way to build real strength over time. Valeth leaned in, voice smooth as silk. "I believe a certain dark mechanicum clade has already expressed interest in assisting you with that process, but that can be discussed later." Kadon gave a slow nod, then countered. 100 vats, and double the gene seed tanks. Implantation costs many zygotes. Losses are inevitable. Harrigan rolled his eyes. "That is the offer. You're in no place to bargain, it's fair." Kadon's grin widened. He turned his gaze to Valeth. "I suppose 2 separate samples of 5,000-year-old Iron Hand's gene seed would be better than 1? For the first time, Valeth blinked. 2 would increase viability, significantly, but you are the only known candidate." Kadon extended his arm toward the man standing behind him. Halatrax stepped forward. "I've been following," he said, voice even. "We've done the math." He nodded to Sadon. "My brother, Halatrax of the 7th, we were both born of Medusa. In fact, we were born in the same landship." He grinned. Valeth arched an elegant brow. Harrigan's composure cracked completely. His hand trembled as he extended it. 100 vats, he whispered, "and 100 for the gene seed." They shook hands. Kadon turned toward Valeth, brow arched. "And what, exactly, does Elfscathia get out of this trade?" Valeth tapped the hololith display once more, then turned his back on the others, hands clasped behind him. "Castell is a rising military power," he said smoothly, "positioned like a blade against the throat of the Arcana Inclusium. They form a bulwark, you see, holding the Imperium at bay, but alone they are not enough." He turned, his gaze falling on Kadon. "With your forces in accidents to ours, your sons forged not in loyalty, but in pragmatic alliance, we gain a partner powerful enough to eliminate the true threat, a new Astartes legion being raised in the Reach." He stepped forward, his voice dropping to a silken whisper. "And when that threat is culled, when the Imperium bleeds itself chasing phantoms in the dark, Elfscathia will hold the entire Arcana Inclusium." He spread his arms theatrically. "The rest of the Reach, you two may divide as you see fit." He smiled. "A fitting end, don't you think? A kingdom for the Voidborn, a warband for the gods, and a throne carved from forgotten stars for me." Kadon shifted uneasily, arms still folded. "So I see," he said slowly. "And you truly believe that between Castell and whatever warband I can assemble, we can challenge the Navis Astra Wigathine and their emerging Astartes chapter?" His voice was dry but not mocking, measured. "By the time we're ready, they'll be mustered, and they'll be waiting for us." Valeth nodded without hesitation. "Quite true. The timing will be close." He stepped lightly to the side, weaving between low tables cluttered with alien blueprints and blood-inked scrolls. "But you misunderstand the nature of the threat," he said, tone shifting from amusement to calculation. "The Astartes being raised now will not be like your kind, Lord Kadon. They are something worse. They will carry tainted blood." He raised a single elegant finger, "What we call Cain Saluth." The name hung in the air like a blade, ancient, alien, and deeply wrong. But Valeth did not look at Kadon as he spoke. He turned to Sorny Nayevna. She stood quietly behind them, flanked by bruised guards, her face impassive, until Valeth's eyes locked with hers. "Which," he said softly, "is also why you are here." Sorny's sharp green eyes met his unflinchingly. There was no fear in her gaze, only recognition, and something colder beneath it.